Okay, hello. We are here with another Codurance Fireside Chat. I'm Sandro Mancuso. I'm here with José Huerta, Mashooq, Badar, and today we picked another topic that will be culture of learning. And as always, like if you're enjoying these conversations, give us the thumbs up, register to the channel, and suggest the next topic. So to kick us off, culture of learning. I think a good place for us to start is how do we even define that? Right? What is culture of learning when companies want to drive, like, oh, we want to have a culture of learning? What does it even mean?
I can start, and Jose, from my point of view, culture of learning is about knowledge, skill, capability that you need within your people, in your organization. So you're trying to create a culture where that flourishes, that people learn from each other, they discuss, and through that there is a common body of knowledge that exists among that community, let's say.
I think that it goes a bit beyond that, because there is an aspect of learned behavior, and the ability to learn and all these things, but there's also a set of values that are part of that kind of culture, right? Like there's something driving the way that people learn to some extent, and that's also an important aspect, I would say, from that. No, it's like, what do people actually value, and what guides their behaviors? Because if you look at it, cultural learning, like if you try to compare, I don't know, an organization that you think has a culture of learning with another organization that you think has a culture of learning, they may manifest very differently, right? But when you look underneath the behaviors, you'll find that there are lots of similarities around what they believe to be the important things, or the priorities, or this shared understanding, independently of how that gets realized. I don't know if it makes sense.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying, because there are, for me, two aspects. One, every time we talk about culture, for me, it doesn't matter what the managers or the companies say about their culture. For me, like, culture is almost like the collective behavior. So it's like, for example, there are a lot of individuals, and the collective behavior of those individuals is what manifests as a culture in a way, but that can be impacted or influenced by the environment that is the company. So that can suppress or redirect or reshape in a way. But for example, you cannot establish like a culture of learning if the individuals themselves, it will be harder to establish a culture of learning company-wide if the individuals themselves don't have that in them.
It's actually really interesting, kind of thinking about the word culture, because we borrow it from people culture, right? Culture in communities. So looking at, I was just thinking, right? What is, what kind of culture do you have, like, as a community, right? And it's a mindset. There might be traditions related to it. There might even be history related to it. There might be ceremonies and traditions, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, if we want, we can go into one of the definitions of let's say organizational culture, right? Where when you get a group of people that are together for a period of time, and as they have to deal with external factors and internal factors within the group, right? There are certain things that work, and they learn that, right? And then they teach that to other people who join the group, and that's sort of how it kind of evolved, right? So that learned behavior is what I would call the culture of the organization. It's changing all the time, right? So this is where you see things like, this is the way that we've always done things here, or there's a certain way of an operating system, if you will, for the organization that nobody knows exactly what it came from, but it's there. And once you can sort of feel it, learn it, and kind of evolve it, right? And then within that, there's Edgar Chain's 3 levels of culture, right? Where you have the artifacts, right? These are the things that you can easily see, right? Like, I don't know, if you're in an agile company, like Post-its on the wall, or dailies or stuff like that, right? Which of course we all know that does not mean that you are, just because you're doing dailies and you're putting Post-its on the wall doesn't mean that you're agile. The same way that, just because you have communities of practice doesn't mean that you have a culture of learning, right?
Yeah.
And then underneath that, you have the values. And as I was saying before, there's this area where, there's certain things that people still talk about, like, I don't know, pragmatism or growth, growth mindset, or this kind of stuff, which is still part of the vocabulary, right? And a lot of companies have these spouse values, right, that are not necessarily the actual values of the company, right? There's the stuff that they put on the wall versus the stuff that actually is, right?
Yeah.
And then underneath that, you have what I would say is the core of, which is the unchallenged assumptions, right? These are just, we've always done things this way, or these are things that people don't talk about. You just get it from, being there, right? And learning from being there. And I feel that in itself makes it really hard, when you're trying to affect change in that way, or you're trying to create a culture of learning, because there are many things that you can easily affect, things like the artifacts, right? Like you could go somewhere and say, well, from now we're going to have, brown bag lunches, and we're going to, people are going to present. But at that level, you're working at the most superficial level, right? Like you're working on the practices, right? Or on the things that companies who have that culture do, right? And expect to some extent to be able to modify others, the ones that are below. So again, it's a social phenomenon, in a sense, and as such, is really really difficult to really pinpoint it. Like, these are the things that you need to do, in order to create that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I have actually a question. You mentioned artifacts, values, and assumptions, and I totally get artifacts. I get values, which is, values are almost like distillation of the behaviors, right? The mindset, and then you have the unchallenged assumptions. And often when people want to, establish a culture of learning within their organization, what they're talking about is a basic set of ways of working that are effective, right? And the mindset and the knowledge. So where does the way of working fit in there, or ways of working fit in there, right? Because I wouldn't classify that as artifact. That's not values.
I would probably I would classify it as artifact as well. Yeah. So if we say, there's it really depends, right? Because, and this is the, the consultant answer, right? Like, you're covered, depends, right? But basically, if you're talking about ways of working, some ways of working come with a set of values, right? Like if you're, and again, I'm taking this a little bit away from the topic, which is, culture of learning, right? But in a sense, agile is also trying to instill a culture of learning. It's that feedback loop. It's that, inspect and adapt and so on, right? So some of these ways of working already have identified certain values, or let's say, a description, of which values a culture where these ways of working can thrive should have. Does that make sense? Yeah. So when you go to, agile, like to Scrum or XP or whatever, right? Like they come with a set of values, right? And what they're saying is, if you already have these values, this is going to fit very well with the way that you want to work, right? And if you don't, then you get all of these clashes and all of these, problems where the practice gets perverted, so it's a combination of those two, right? Like it's like practices, this is what you need to do, and then maybe there's an aspect of values at the second level where if it's well defined, things like Kanban and so on, they only focus on the values, right? And there's a couple of practices, but it mostly tells you work on this stuff, and then the practices will kind of emerge as long as you're taking care of these 5 things, move forward, like do whatever you want that fits within that framework. And for me, that's the thing. Does that does that make sense for you, Matt? Because you have the question. So
not 100%. You kind of lost me there because we kind of went into 2 different things. There is a learning organization and culture of learning, because you mentioned agile is a culture of learning based on feedback, and that is more like a learning organization. And this is where I'm kind of thinking exactly what do we mean by this now, because learning on one end is through feedback and having that fast feedback loops and all that kind of stuff and being able to act on it. That's one area. When we talk about culture learning, I'm more maybe where I was more thinking about knowledge acquisition, creating a collective mindset,
So,
right? That or a community of that kind of thing. That's where I was actually coming from.
I was coming from that point as well, Mesh, but I actually found very interesting what Jose said, because I never associated the feedback loops that you try to establish with agile practices, right? Feedback loops at all levels, like you mentioned Kanban, you mentioned maybe process method, agile processes, agile methodologies that are more focused on the process, or agile methodologies that are more focused on the technical side. But at the end of the day, always the short feedback loop, inspect and adapt. And I didn't associate the inspect and adapt as a learning organization, which is truly is. Once you say so, yeah, of course it is. But I never put on the same bucket, let's say. And this leads me to the topic. For example, when people talk about culture of learning, what are they talking about? Because this is an interesting one that Jose brought in that I was not considering. There is the short feedback loop, and there are even things like innovations or experiments and stuff. So this is a culture of learning at a more organizational level, which is a very valid, and it should happen. And we don't really pay much attention to it. And then there is the other 2 that I had in mind. And sometimes they are in conflict, and that's what I wanted to actually explore. For example, one side is like what people want to learn. Each individual, they want to learn different things, right? And they might want some formal time to do that. They say, no, it would be good for us to have some time so that we can learn. But that's one side of it. It's what they individually want to learn. Another thing is what the company wants to learn. And that leads a little bit more towards Jose, not all the way towards the agile methodology, but for example, a company that wants to introduce a new product or a new technology stack or a new strategy. So they might want to get learning in that area. So for example, when the company wants to invest in a culture of learning, they would like their people to learn skills in order to apply those skills back into the business. And sometimes there is a misalignment between what people want to learn formally and what the company needs them to learn formally.
Yeah, I think that's where I was coming from a capability, skills, knowledge perspective, is that when organizations are talking about culture of learning, they're talking about equipping their people so they're effective in doing their job. Right. So, of course, we can talk about the learning organization, but I think we can park that maybe for another time, because that's a much bigger topic on itself, but more about a culture of learning in terms of creating a mindset and or ways of learning within the organization that help. That it's about learning from each other, isn't it? I mean, that's what, because when we talk about culture learning, often one of the first things that comes to mind is communities of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And often when people talk to us about establishing a good technical culture of learning, we talk to them about communities of practice. We talk to them about how you seed those communities of practice and how you make them a success, right? Now, that might not be the only thing, but that's the vehicle that we use. And then those communities of practice are aligned towards the kind of capabilities that we want, right? We may have a technical community of practice for, software development practices. We may have one on product ownership or product management. We might have one on project management, those analysis, UX, this kind of thing. So these are all capabilities or bodies of knowledge and skills that we want people to come together, the like-minded people, and support each other in learning and actually doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And there's a thing there, Mash, around, because you were mentioning the learning organization, right? And I would say I was not referring exactly to the learning organization, although the underlying stuff is pretty much the same. It's about learning. Only the scope or the scale at which you're learning, it's a lot bigger, right, than maybe what we're talking about, no? But the mechanics of it, how that happens, even at the individual level, right, are the same. There is a feedback loop that is happening there. Yeah, if you want to call it, PDCA or whatever. No, it's like you plan, you do something, you learn from that, and then like you react to that, and that's how you learn individually, right? Like when you're doing katas, that's kind of like the process that you're going through, right? Like you're going through that reflection of, doing the practice and learning from it and so on, right? When you do that in teams or in communities of practice, in group, you're also doing that. Yeah. The difference maybe is that you're going through that cycle and you're making sense. So that analysis part or that understanding part, it happens at the group level. Yeah. Where, for instance, something that you think it's good, may not be good for someone else in there, or they may have different experiences from doing exactly the same thing and so on. And that's, that group learning aspect is happening. But that is one of the skill sets in order to get a learning organization, right? And in order to innovate and in order to they do all these things, right? So the practice of having communities, right? And for a community to be a community of practice, for me, it has to have three things, right? Like it needs to have a focus, a domain. No, this is the part that you were like, this is, we're gonna focus, we're gonna learn, or we're gonna learn about the practice of this thing, right? Like it doesn't learn about anything. It just, it brings people together, right? Then there's the community aspect, which a lot of people forget about, like, the connection and the social aspect of it. And then there's the practice aspect. And this is another mistake that a lot of people make, no? When we're going to start doing communities of practice, and then suddenly, you get speakers coming in every day or, whatever, but there's no practice being done, right? It's just someone delivering content, or someone just, so those aspects for me are kind of essential, and they are all part of that learning cycle. No.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, Mesh, if you would like to expand on that, but because there are, I would like you to change the focus a little bit. There are normally, first, two different types of requests, let's say. That people come to me. So, for example, sometimes there are the developers themselves or technical people themselves. When they say, like, how can I create a culture of learning in my organization? It's coming from the developers, from the technical people, or from the teams and so on, right? And sometimes the request comes from the company. The company comes, and the company, I say, like, someone is heading the department or a team, and so it's like, I would like to instill a culture of learning. And they are very different types of perspectives to the same thing, but they have different problems, I feel. And I would like to explore a little bit, for example, if we tackle from the individual perspective. And I would like to make a correlation. If you take from the individual perspective first, that would like more formal time to learn, right? That's where they're normally coming from. I would love to have more time so that I can learn. Yeah. So here is where I'm conflicted. And I'll tell you why I'm conflicted. There is the software craftsmanship mindset. And one thing that is extremely strong in the craftsmanship mindset is career ownership, right? So there is a very good book I heard, it's called The Software Craftsman, right? So it covers both sides, by the way. But it's funny because like...
Nicely plugged.
Yeah, it's quite nice. So I heard it's quite good. But for example, in one, I spend like most of the time talking about career ownership. Say, look, you know what? You should not wait for a company to buy you a book or to create formal time. If you want to learn something, you should not be limited by the time that your company gives or the space the company creates. So if you want to invest in your career, so then you should invest in your own career. So this distinction is important for me, because when I want to learn something that is specific for myself, right, for my own career, I feel that it's fair that I use my own investment. It's my own career. Not everything that I want to learn is applicable at work. So I think that I'm trying to get is like being a professional is like, who pays for my learning, right? So for example, but if what I want to learn is aligned to the learnings of the company, that's when it is the best case scenario. For example, I want to learn something that is very useful to where the company is going or what they need and stuff. This is a much easier conversation to have, because then there is an investment from both sides, right? So it makes sense from a company's perspective to invest and create that space that people can learn stuff, but whatever they're trying to learn needs to be aligned to what they want to do. So this is why I think that, for example, I had a conversation very recently with a company, and there was a group of people in there, and developers, tech leads, managers and stuff. And some developers will say, no, but I want to learn these and that, but I don't want to use my weekends to learn that. And that, for me, it shocked me in a way, and I had to say, I could not hold my tongue in a way. I said, like, okay, so let me get this straight. So you as a software professional cannot justify to yourself to invest your own time and money to learn something that you really want to learn. So you yourself cannot justify your own time and put your own time and money to learn something that you really think that is important and want to learn, but you want someone else to pay for it. So how does that work? See what I'm saying? So, and this is a scenario where there is a misalignment. So I want to be very clear in the distinction of me trying to learn some things that are not necessarily aligned to what the company needs as a professional. And this is why I'm conflicted. But on the other hand, I'll finish my point very quickly. On the other hand, I feel that it's extremely important for companies to create a space so that the people can learn, because the more that their people know, the better that they are at what they do, the better it will be for the company, as long as those skills are applicable back to the company. Otherwise, it makes no sense.
So I'm going to kind of widen this a bit, because to me, actually, a culture of learning, when we talk about culture of learning, we talk about within the company, maybe events and things that are happening, or the communities of practice within the company. And I think it's wider than that, because actually that will just create a kind of slightly larger echo chamber. There are things, as an individual, there are things that you can learn on your own, right? In your own time as well, or not. So then there are things that you can only learn within a community, right? In fact, a lot of the tacit knowledge that exists, you have to. So I'm kind of thinking back towards, like, when we were working as software developers, and we were engaged in communities within and outside work, right? But I think not only did we benefit from that, So having both internal and external communities, because they had different types of focus as well. But the company itself benefited as well, because we were bringing in knowledge and ways of working and mindsets from other communities that we were externally part of back into the organization as well. And so I think it's important that we create that mindset within individuals. Of course, companies should provide the time and support for the things that are aligned, but actually individuals should not just be looking at the communities of practice within the company. They should be looking at communities of practice outside in the industry as well. And that has a benefit both for the individual and the organization and those communities in the industry as well. All three.
But becomes a little bit more tangible, right? So, for example, I understand, for example, let's say the company's focus in one type of business or one type of technology or product or whatever. And then your internal communities of practice, they go a little bit beyond, one or two spheres beyond what you do. But it cannot be completely to a new level. While you are using company time and company money to do that, when that is not a strong case. You see what I'm saying? Because then it's difficult to justify that, unless it is by design. The company says, but that comes to the other topic that Jose brought in. Say, maybe we could have dedicated time to explore different things that we might decide to invest, and we have a labs. But that becomes a company strategy as well. This is what I'm trying to say.
No, I agree. I mean, in order for something like a community of practice to really take on, it requires support, and it requires to some extent for it to find its place in the organization, and that includes strategic place, right? Like if it's not contributing, chances are it will be very hard to make it stick and to really get the support that it needs. And I feel there are a few ways that can happen, right? Like you talked about innovation, right? Like having the community of practice as a way to, try out new things, maybe cross-pollinate from the industry and spread that internally. There's the knowledge sharing aspect as well. There is the tackling hard problems, right? Like we all are part of this thing. We all have kind of the same problems, like how do we solve them, right? All of those things add value to the organization, and they're in many cases they're really easy to quantify, right? Like how much value did we implement this? Yes or no? Is it providing the results that we wanted? So there is a case to be made around those things, And to your point, Sandro, where you were saying, as a professional, should I agree. You should take ownership of your own development. It makes it easier if you also have the space to do it, right? And when all of those things are aligned, you get a very good result, right? Like if you have people that are motivated to learn and they're driven to improve and to do things, and you have an organization that is able to recognize the value in that, and to make it work towards a strategic objective, then the sky is the limit, so to speak.
I think for an organization, it's absolutely essential that you nurture this kind of attitude or behaviors in people, right? We've been to organizations where you think it's kind of stuck in a time warp. People are there, they're kind of working, but because there is no internal or external community or kind of that sharing of knowledge, they're constantly working on what needs to be done. And acquisition of knowledge beyond that is not really valued by the organization, and also turns people into kind of this, automatons. They come, they do a job, and they go away, but they're not really learning, they're not growing in there. And in fact, as an organization, if you can instill this mindset for learning, then the conversations about I don't want to learn in my own time kind of go away, because actually it becomes integrated into the person. So they are more inclined to learn outside the bounds of work as well. But of course, in order to create that kind of mindset from within a particular organization, you as an organization, you need to invest. You need to invest into that kind of culture, right? And you need to help them kind of move, or you need to encourage those kind of behaviors where people are learning, right? Because often that learning means that they're not directly contributing to the next feature, right? And this could be difficult for organizations, because then there is investment for the organization, but actually what that creates is a reinforcing loop, where when you are investing in your people to learn, the people are more invested to learn, and they then start not thinking about just the work as the place to learn, but also outside work as well.
I think that it is, I can certainly see that. I just don't see it happening everywhere. Of course, there is always exceptions. I accept that as well. But there is just as much as a company can do. This is another aspect that I wanted to put it in here, right? I just want to be very clear. I think that, like, ideally, the company should find that alignment. So I don't think that, I personally think that companies should create some space for people to learn, but that learning should be aligned to what the company needs to do, right? So that's why the company, so it becomes an investment for the company, and it's aligned with the investment for people. But if people want to make a different investment in terms of, people end up becoming a bit limited to what the boundaries that the company is willing to create, right? So if they want to go beyond that, they should do that individually. Because I can only speak for myself. This is because this is what's at the heart of the craftsmanship, right? Is take ownership. If you want to learn, buy your own books. Invest your time. You don't be limited by what your company is offering, but also, and be thankful for the companies that are also creating that space. And on the other hand, the company should be smart in creating those environments, because the better their people are, the better they will be as a company. There is no doubt. So I understand that but I think that is separate. There is an individual responsibility and there is a company investment, and it's great when they are both aligned. But for example, more in practice, I think there is also, I don't think that is just creating the environment is enough, because there is, like I've seen in organizations where we actually created communities of practice, where formally that space was created, like every 2 hours, every whatever Friday or Monday or whatever that was, that space was there so people could come in and join in the events, the learning space, and so on and so forth. And how often, I don't know, like the two of you, but people listening, but the struggle that was to bring people in. And it's not because most of them had big deadlines. Of course, there were exceptional cases where people had big deadlines and they could not come in. But quite often, some people would not come. We can also address why they would not come. But there is, and for me, like, there is a type of person, like, for example, you find a lot of them in technical communities. They will learn regardless if people create a space for them or not. So if you hire that kind of people, then you are in the best of the both worlds, because then they will learn regardless. It's in them. It's innate in them. They are curious. They want to learn. They like what they do. It's not just a job. And then when the company creates a space with these kind of people in the company, that's when it thrives.
Yeah, that's what I mean by a reinforcing loop. It works the other way around as well. So you get people that are really curious and already motivated to learn. And when the company actually is helping them, and I totally agree, by the way, that, the company is a business. At the end of the day, they should be investing in the skills and knowledge that's relevant. There is a wide spectrum of that, and we can talk about, technical and softer skills, as we sometimes refer to them. But for example, if the person was very enthusiastic and they wanted to learn, and let's say the company didn't really value learning that much, and they were only about the next feature and the pressure and all those kind of things, if the person doesn't have the good sense to kind of leave that company quickly enough, their motivation, their thirst for that learning will get kind of beaten down at some point, to the point where, you know, equilibrium is kind of at the point where nobody wants to learn. The organization doesn't want the individual to learn, the individual doesn't want to learn. Similarly, if you know, as you said, the reinforcing loop where the person really wants to learn, the organization is encouraging learning, this is a great situation. On the other hand, if someone joins, and let's say it's happening in isolation, the company is really kind of promoting learning, they can slowly bring that person out of that, you know, kind of or the behavior that where they don't want to learn. They can slowly try to bring out of them. And in fact, within the company, if there is a thriving culture of learning, the kind of people who will come and thrive in there are the people who will want to learn. And people, and the kind of people who don't want to learn or not very interested will slowly want to, or just not flourish within that environment, right? So that's that. So it is a system in a way, right?
So I have a question now. Like, okay, so if I'm an organization that wants to instill a culture of learning, what can I do?
So quite a few things, and they have different types of degrees of investment and different types of returns in terms of time and money. So for example, change your recruitment process straight away. So you know why I say that? Is because if you as a manager feel that your company is not learning, it's not only the process that is not there. There is far more to it, right? So make sure that you change the kind of people that you are also wanting to bring to your organization. If you bring people that are investing their time on learning themselves, that when the space is created, if it's not already created, they can benefit from that and spread that passion in there. So when they say that they want a culture of learning, normally they want far more than that. They want to change multiple aspects of their company, their culture and the ways of working and stuff. So start bringing the people that will help you to get there and can ignite that learning. That's one thing that I would change straight away. Then you need a few champions as well. Also, you need to start small. Like I was discussing that with one company. Sometimes the implementation is wrong. Some companies, they actually create the space. They have their community of practice. They have the time allocated, but it's just not working. It's not popular. One of the common mistakes is to combine the learning with work. Although we were talking about investment in here, it is slightly different. One thing is to use that space directly for a feature, as Mesh was saying. For example, let's use our learning time, our community of practice, to refactor our code. See what I'm saying? I've seen people trying to do that, like, so that we could do mob programming in our existing code base. Yeah, you can. For some of them, if they want to do that, fine. But quite often they bind too closely the learning to the immediate work that they are doing, and this doesn't work. Another thing that another mistake that they do is they try to manage that. Who is coming, who is not coming, and they try to judge people by that. So there is a pressure from the company, and a worse pressure is from the peers. If you don't come to the community of practice, you are not part of this group. So you end up creating a hostile environment. So I mean, so it's almost like people feel pressure to be there, but they don't want to be there. So our recommendation is like, if you're going to create a space for learning, let it be a space for learning. Don't manage. Don't try to get people. Don't force people to go. Just make it very enjoyable and always open to people to come. So, for example, for the people that didn't come that session, speak to them how cool that was. Not judging them for not coming, because maybe they had a deadline, maybe they were late with something or whatever else, right? So that, but they say, hey, shame you could not make this time. Like, we are meeting again in 2 weeks' time anyway, or in next week and stuff. So whenever you feel like, come along. So make it needs to be a pleasure. This is the recommendation I always give. If you want to create a space for learning that needs to be a pleasure. You cannot have deadlines. You cannot be treated too seriously, because we already have that pressure at work. We already have those deadlines, those commitments, that management. And if you try to apply the same, you're going to kill that initiative.
I have conflicting feelings about that, because before you were saying, the image that came to mind was Field of Dreams, the Kevin Costner movie. Like, if you build it, they will come. Kind of thing. Like, yeah, it's the guy just builds a stadium, right? Like, and people will come
in a cornfield.
In a cornfield. So there is that aspect of people thinking that a community of practice to thrive and to be successful doesn't need any management. Like, it will just happen. You just need the right ingredients.
It was not what I meant. It was
I understand.
No. There is the management of the community of practice. What I meant was, like, of course, you need to manage the running of the community, make sure it works and stuff. So that is the management of the community to exist and to have the sessions and stuff. What we should not bind that to is to performance reviews, for example, is to some strong expectation, because I haven't seen in all those years initiatives like that would bring the entire company in. I think you should be happy if you get 20% of your people actively participating. That's, for me, already a massive success.
But that's a different thing, because for instance, I also have an issue with that, because I understand that you should not, judge performance whether you went to the community of practice or not. But what about the people who do? What about the people who are motivated and are contributing? That should also be recognized by the organization as well.
Well, but that's not what they're there for, right? They're not there to get like a point.
I'm not saying
in the next pay rise or promotion.
I agree.
It would be recognized in a different way, because the
by the knowledge that they acquire.
Yeah, exactly. The knowledge that they're acquiring, the skills that they're acquiring, will help them thrive in the work that they do, and they will be recognized in that way. But that's indirect. That's not directly related to them attending that community.
Both, like the knowledge that they acquire and apply, but also the knowledge that they share with their people. Like, for example, if there are people that are very active and they are sharing the knowledge with their people, they themselves individually are making the organization better. So that is a recognition in there as well.
There is
more or less. So I agree. Yeah. So this is not about collecting stars and badges, right? That's not the point I was trying to make. That can be in itself detrimental, right, to what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, but there needs to be a recognition, either direct or indirect. Yeah, but it needs to be there, because that is part of that. Like, again, going back to, in order for a community of practice to thrive and so on, needs to be connected to strategic objectives and all of that. So it needs to be recognized by the organization at some level, as something good and rewarded in that sense, right?
So sorry, Jose, I think I disagree with that, because I think, yes, it needs to be recognized by the organization in terms of providing the support and regarding it well as a community, right? And providing the help it needs, right? But not rewarding the individuals, because the individuals should be rewarded by the community itself, because we're talking about this community element, right? And it's about this social community that you are creating, where people are supporting each other and learning from each other, and that in itself is the reward, and that should be the reward. That's the intrinsic reward. If the company at some point starts coming into individuals and say, well done for organizing X number of events for the community, or speaking at the conference, at the community things, that's not That's
I would
really,
say I don't agree. I don't agree. Like coming to someone and saying, "Hey, good job for keeping this thing alive." I don't think that's a bad thing.
maybe that's good feedback.
No.
Okay, I agree. That's good
actually
feedback,
a
but
reward.
that's not a
No,
reward, right?
but that's not a reward.
That for me that
okay.
is a
Okay,
reward.
if that's what you mean by reward, then
recognition.
maybe we agree.
Okay. No,
Okay,
yeah.
so
So if we're
maybe
talking
we
about
should,
like feedback that you give to reinforce the behavior and say, like, you
Yes,
know what, like we as a
exactly.
company
That's what I
recognize
mean.
that this is okay. So that's a different story.
That's what I
the
mean.
way-
It doesn't mean a monetary reward. It doesn't mean
Okay.
status. It doesn't mean like it doesn't have to mean that, right?
It shouldn't.
No. Again, what I'm trying to say is we miss out on opportunities to recognize and value and do all of these things, and they don't necessarily need to be tied up to a monetary reward or something like that, right? And that also keeps, so that encouragement, I think, is part of keeping the community alive. And it happens at every level. It happens at the like if someone is like taking a step forward in the like in the core group, like really like moving things forward, it happens at that level. But it should also happen at within the circles of that. No, like when someone comes in and maybe they don't come every session, but they prepare a workshop and people, I feel like that should also be rewarded, right? Whether you reward it,
when you
wrong,
say rewarded,
or you.
Yeah, just to be clear, because I think that the word rewarded or rewarding someone is what's creating the misalignment here.
Yeah.
Because like there is a difference between rewarded and recognized, or maybe like
or even encouraging.
Encourage it exactly. So because for example, the way I see it, like if the company decides to create a space from a company perspective, that's an investment, right? So I'm going to create a space where our people can learn, get better at what they do, discover new things, and we'll be a better company because of that investment in there. And because we made that decision, as any other company initiative, being the projects, being whatever, when people are doing well, because you plan for those things, you are investing money in the projects, in everything you do, and every time that those things are going well and people are performing well, you want to recognize them and to encourage them. So
you were gonna say reward.
I would say rewarded because of the word was in my head, but there is a difference between, for example, because you did that, then and you had 72% of attendance in our community of practice.
I agree. That's the wrong way to go about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it is about recognition. It's about encouragement. It's about publicizing success, right? Because there is an aspect there of giving visibility to things that are being achieved and so on. And those again they are things that from my perspective, they're easy to do, and they work in a healthy way towards incentivizing people to express those behaviors. Yeah.
Sorry, Jose. I was when you talk about incentives, people outside the organization also organize communities, right? We ourselves have been doing that as well. And what incentivized us to do it, right? It's not the recognition from the company, but I was more thinking that there is when we were organizing and there was a smaller group within the community that was the organizers, right? And there was a camaraderie, friendship, and this group was quite dynamic. People were coming in and going out as they were, they had more time, they were helping more as they were busy, they were not. But also there was this group were friends, and people created these friendships. And other people who wanted to come and organize, they wanted to also be part of that friendship circle, and they could do that by helping organizing the community. Then there was also this internal kudos within the community. If you were one of the organizers, other people looked to you, and they appreciate it. And at the end of each session you ran, everyone clapped, and you were happy that you ran it. The discussions that happened within it not kind of gave you a kind of almost like a social reward as well as kind of gain in knowledge. So that's what I mean. There are many rewards that are actually inherent within the community itself. Now the trick is, can you create that kind of community inside the organization?
Yeah, this is where I would get you, because this is what the point that I was trying to make before. I've seen different type over all those years. I've seen many different types of initiatives like that in different companies and stuff. The ones that normally survived, at least for a little bit longer than others, they were because the people had that in them. It was less for the effort of the company and more for the effort of the people. And I'll give you a very concrete example. When we were at an investment bank, Mash and I, this thing about community of practice and stuff did not exist. They were all about business, and we worked like very long hours, right? So going to the manager and say, hey, we want 2 hours every 2 weeks or every week or stuff, it was a no, right? So then we had a different impact, because when people say, I don't have time outside working hours, I can understand that different people have different personal lives and stuff, but everyone has a lunchtime, right? And this is what I had. This is what we had in our department. We had lunchtime. And you know how we started? I bought a copy of the 7 Languages in 7 Weeks book. And I was excited because I wanted to learn different languages and different paradigms. And then I remember telling a few people and say, look, every Wednesday, I booked that meeting room over there, and I will be there going through the languages. And that's all I've done. In the first week that I announced that, I had 3 people coming. And then what happened? I didn't have to ask authorization for a manager. I didn't ask anything for the project or the company or anything. Like, I bought the book, I booked the meeting room, and I spend 1 hour every week learning a new language, right? So the first time, 3 people, what we did, because we were excited about learning Ruby back then, I even remember which language was the first. We were all Java, learning Ruby, dynamic and different. So we were excited. We started talking about that in the coffee breaks at lunchtime and stuff. And then other members of the team got excited. What happened on the following Wednesday? We had 6 or 7 people. And at some point we had 12. So, and one thing that happened was my manager, he was walking around, so like, what are you guys doing in this meeting room? So yeah, we bought a copy of this book and we are learning this
using
language.
company resources.
No, on the contrary, he saw us every week, because we tell, so no, every Wednesday we come here and we learn. And he said, oh, that's very cool and stuff. And then he went out, and then we had a chat. But he saw the desire that people had, if they had the time, the desire that they had to learn. And with that in mind, I was able to make a case to have a 2 hour every 2 weeks where we halved. It was half company time. Mesh might remember that. Half company time, half personal time. Our time was officially 9 to 5. No one finished at 5. Everyone finished at 7 anyway. But like we said, okay, you know what? Our community of practice will go from 4 to 6. 1 hour company time, 1 hour personal time. And that was a good thing. And all of a sudden, we have a thriving community for a few years there until we left, and so on and so forth. But what I'm trying to say is that was driven by the people with very little effort or support from the company. And we had a thriving ones. And the ones that I've seen driven from the top, from the managers, like, okay, I want my people to learn. From now on, you have 2 hours every 2 weeks. They died in 2 weeks.
I mean, there's lots of pitfalls that can happen, right? Like you know, having let's say a skilled facilitator, someone who can actually incentivize people to like do something like this is essential from my point of view. And it's also a pitfall, because a lot of the times what I've seen is communities dying because the one person that was kind of like pushing everything forward suddenly, you know, has a kid and disappears from the face of the planet. No, that's one aspect. Another aspect is about, as I mentioned, there needs to be a combination of the the practice, the community, and learning about the specific domain, no, and especially the community aspect. I feel a lot of the time is missing, right? Like creating those connections. And when we started the software craftsmanship community here in Spain, or the agile community and so on, a lot of these people, like, yes, we were learning together and all of that, but after the event, we would go and have beers, right? Or we would go and just socialize and talk about our lives and, like what we were doing. And, like that kind of stuff is not related to work. It's not related to the domain, but it brings that thing together, right?
And they talk, actually, when they're having drinks or coffee or whatever, that's when they're still talking about the stuff that they learn.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And they are learning. Those are informal conversations, but they are actually very valuable. And maybe this is what's missing, right? Often in the community events within the organization, they're usually in the middle, right? In between. I remember, like, when I was at UBS, we also used to have this event called Code and Coffee, right? Where we would get up really early to get to a coffee shop for 7 a.m. so we could spend a couple of hours with our friends talking about work, talking about code, right? And maybe that's what's missing, because often in the work setting, you have an hour, 2 hour, you do the event and you get back to work, and there's no time to socialize.
Yeah, this is what I feel, that sometimes a lot of people are asking, oh, the company needs to do this, the company needs to do that, but they themselves are not putting the effort. And it doesn't take much. As I said, there are tons of different ways for you to drive a community, like ways for you to learn within working hours that is not expensive. Lunchtime, breaks, starting a little bit earlier. So those are just things, and the advantage of doing things, I'll get to the company as well, but those are things that the advantage of you driving the change, you as an individual, as a professional, choosing those slots that you have, the lunchtime, the before work or stuff, is because you control what you learn. And you have a much bigger case, because once you show that there is a group of people that is already doing that, it's much easier to make a case with your manager, with your company, and say, look, we are already doing that. Like, why don't we meet halfway? It's an easier case. But then there is the company side as well. It's so easy to do certain things. Again, it's an hour here. Like, there are book clubs. There are even things, we talked about community of practice. Those are the most common things, right? Community of practice, sometimes book clubs, and the community of practice can have different types of sessions, as we discussed as well. So, for example, you are there to practice, and practice might be a discussion, a group. You don't need to have a mistake. Is to always have someone that is the person with the knowledge that will come and talk at people. So this doesn't work well. So the community of practice should be, Mesh was mentioning that earlier on today, that the community of practice, as in the technical communities outside, we go there to discuss, to work together, to pair, or to pick a topic and as a group
interact,
discuss.
Basically, yeah.
Exactly. And this is what needs to be replicated, because that's what gives us pleasure to keep going back in there, and not just to watch someone talking about. But there are a few other things that can also be done. For example, people can switch projects for one iteration. So mainly when you have people working on the same systems, right? A company is I don't know, building a product. So doing swaps across teams, that's another way that you can promote some learning, right? So, and then there are the dedicated programs. If companies want to adopt a specific technology or some stuff, then create a track just for that, right? Yeah. But then the more, I think that the message I want to say is, the more the company is responsible for providing the environment, the more the company controls what individuals need to learn. So you as an individual, if you find the right time and balance, you have far more control in what you learn. And that's the balance that you need to understand. From a company perspective, it's an investment. And smart companies will make that investment.
Smart companies will actually align the individual with the organization's goals, right?
But as an individual, you need to thrive.
Yeah.
There's one aspect that you just mentioned, because it is an investment, right? And as an investment, another thing that usually happens is that there is no record of what happened or what those learnings were, and that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's another pitfall that people tend to fall into, right? Like you do this great session, and I don't know, if it's a talk, nobody records it. If it's a workshop, there's no kind of, note taking, if you will, of the learnings. And then in some cases, if there is, it's really hard to find later on, no? Or it's really difficult to take out and use. Right. And I feel that's one of those things that is important, because you're not making an ephemeral investment. Right. It's something that can last and can definitely, multiply the value of what it is. So if you're giving a talk, why does it have to be that day when you gave the talk, right? Like you can record that and have it, and people who join the company later, or who maybe got interested in the subject later, whatever, they will have all of that there, right? It's that intellectual capital, and making sure that gets aligned, that gets, let's say, registered with the information systems that you have in place. That is also quite important if you want to derive value.
Yeah, especially for an organization, bringing that out, kind of creating that historical artifact, allowing people to go back to it is essential.
We are running out of time, and Jose has apparently a very nice chicken in the oven that should be ready at any minute right now. So there are just two things that I want to throw in very, very quickly. There are also a few tips for communities, I'll call it communities of practice, because this is probably what we all understand better. To thrive, it needs to be repetitive, not repetitive. Is it the word repetitive?
Had a cadence.
A cadence. Exactly. Yeah. It needs to be a very well-defined cadence. People need to know that every other Tuesday at 2:00 in room A, that will be blocked for the community of practice, right? So they need to know when it happens, because then each individual can plan themselves to attend, right? So that's one thing. It needs to be inclusive in terms of pick topics, pick things that are easy for people to join. So that's what I mean by inclusive. Don't pick topics that are very niche and maybe just a few individuals are interested, because otherwise you just have those few individuals in there, right? So always make topics that are more generic, so people can always join whenever they feel like. Don't judge. Whoever welcome is the right people, whoever comes is the right people, and whoever could not come, they are always welcome to come whenever they are free, right? So don't judge who comes and who doesn't. Just makes always there people feel comfortable. Those are a few tips for me to just some tips. There are other thing that I would like just to very quickly add, because I'm a bit concerned of time, is there are a few blocks as well for a culture of learning. Is you cannot think about a culture of learning if your house is always on fire, right? So, for example, if your team is always pressured for deadlines, people always have a gun in their neck and say, hey, I want the new feature. If that's the kind of environment they are working, there's no way they can create space for learning. So you need to have sustainable pace. You need to have you need to create time for that. Right, so that people feel comfortable, because as I was saying, even in companies where they created official times for people to join, people from certain projects would never join, because in their projects, their house was always on fire. So you need to sort out. There are some foundations that needs to be in place so that a culture of learning could thrive. So I just wanted to share. I don't know if you guys have a few other tips for.
From my point of view, it's about, remember that it's a community. Create that community feel. Create that place where people can come and support each other, or where they can gather support from. Make it interactive as much as you can, and provide a social element.
Mm-hmm. Any final words from you, Jose?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you think this fireside chat things are the start maybe of a community?
What do you mean by that? Expand.
Meta.
So expand so that I understand what you are asking.
Wait, I need to add more time to the thing, or it's gonna ring. Yeah, I mean, no. If we look at this, we have the social aspect, right? We have the domain, which could be pretty generic. If you look at it, we talk about all kinds of stuff, right? And there's a practice aspect to it as well, right? Like we're all taking from each other's experiences and all that stuff. And I feel like maybe the people that are listening to this as well, they may be taking it not as interactive, right? But I'm sure
they're also part of this community.
They're also part of that community, to a different level. So yeah, it's more like a question mark, no? That we're talking about.
It's a very good question,
learning,
actually.
right?
I mean, the three of us are part of that community, and people listening to us are also.
So, well, why don't we ask people, like, for example, if you are listening to this and you would like to have this live, for example, where you could interact with us and then ask questions, maybe even join in and stuff. So leave on the comments and see, like, maybe we could run a poll, or just put on the comments if you would like to interact, and we have a live session. And
yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, definitely. Good idea.
Okay, excellent. So let's wrap up for today, so Jose can have his nice chicken.
Yes.
Before it burns in the oven, right? Okay, well, if you like this chat, as always, like, give the thumbs up, write on the comments. If you want us to address any topic, want to discuss anything that you are interested, let us know, and we'll do our best to address that. Thank you very much, guys. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.